Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the life of a man whose name has echoed through history for over 2 millennia. A military genius, a visionary leader, and a figure so legendary it's hard to separate the man from the myth. We're talking, of course, about Alexander the Great. So, who was this guy who conquered most of the known world before his 33rd birthday? Let's travel back to 356 BC in Pella, the capital of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedonia. This is where our story begins. Alexander was born to King Philip II and Queen Olympias. Now, this wasn't exactly your average happy family. Philip was a brilliant, ambitious military strategist who was busy transforming Macedon from a backwater kingdom into a dominant military power. Olympias was a fiercely intelligent and deeply religious woman from Epirus who claimed descent from the mythical hero Achilles. She believed her son was destined for greatness and might have even told him he was a son of Zeus. Talk about high expectations. From a young age, Alexander showed incredible promise. He was sharp, curious, and fearless. There's the famous story of him taming the wild stallion, Bucephalus, a horse no one else could ride. While others tried to use force, a young Alexander noticed the horse was afraid of its own shadow. He simply turned Bucephalus towards the sun, calmed him, and leaped onto his back. This horse would become his faithful companion, carrying him across continents on his campaigns. But it wasn't just about brawn. King Philip knew his son needed a world-class education. So, who do you hire to tutor the future king? None other than the greatest philosopher of the age, Aristotle. For 3 years, Aristotle taught Alexander everything from politics and medicine to philosophy and literature. He instilled in him a deep love for Greek culture, especially the works of Homer. Alexander reportedly slept with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow, modeling himself after its hero, Achilles. This education shaped his worldview, giving him not just the skills to conquer, but a vision for the world he wanted to create. Everything changed in 336 BC. King Philip was assassinated, and at just 20 years old, Alexander inherited the throne. It was a shaky start. The Greek city-states Philip had subdued saw a chance to rebel, but Alexander acted with lightning speed and ruthless efficiency. He marched south, crushing any opposition, most notably destroying the city of Thebes as a brutal warning to others. With Greece secured, he turned his attention to his father's ultimate dream, the invasion of Persia. The Persian Empire was the superpower of the day, a colossal entity stretching from Egypt to India. It seemed an impossible task. Alexander crossed into Asia Minor in 334 BC with an army of about 40,000 Macedonians and Greeks. He was massively outnumbered, but he had a few secret weapons, a highly disciplined, professional army, brilliant tactics, and his own unwavering belief in his destiny. His first major test was the Battle of the Granicus River. The Persians held a strong defensive position, but Alexander, against the advice of his generals, led a daring cavalry charge straight across the river and up the bank, shattering the enemy lines. It was a risky move, but it worked. This victory set the tone for the entire campaign. Alexander wasn't just a commander. He was a warrior who led from the front, inspiring his men by sharing their dangers. Next came the Battle of Issus in 333 BC here. Alexander faced the Persian king Darius III himself. The Persian army was enormous, but Alexander spotted a weakness in their formation. He led his elite companion cavalry in a decisive charge directly at Darius. The Persian king, seeing the furious young Macedonian charging towards him, panicked and fled the battlefield. The Persian army collapsed, and Alexander captured Darius's entire family, including his mother, wife, and daughters. But instead of treating them as slaves, he treated them with the utmost respect, a gesture that earned him admiration even among his enemies. Instead of chasing Darius, Alexander made a strategic move. He marched south along the Mediterranean coast, securing the crucial naval bases of the Persian fleet. This led to the legendary siege of Tyre, a city on an island fortress that seemed impenetrable. For 7 months, the Tyrians held out. Alexander's solution: if you can't sail to the island, bring the land to the island. He ordered his engineers to build a massive causeway, a land bridge, all the way to the city walls. It was an incredible feat of engineering and sheer determination. Once the walls were breached, the city fell. With the coast secured, he entered Egypt. The Egyptians, who had been ruled by the Persians, welcomed him as a liberator. They even declared him a pharaoh and a living god. It was in Egypt that he founded the first and most famous of his many cities, Alexandria. This wasn't just a military outpost. It was designed to be a center of trade, culture, and learning, complete with its famous library. It was the first step in his vision of a Hellenistic world, a fusion of Greek and Eastern cultures. Finally, in 331 BC, it was time for the final showdown with Darius. On the plains of Gaugamela, in modern-day Iraq, the two armies met for the last time. Darius had gathered an immense force, reportedly numbering up to 250,000 soldiers, including scythed chariots and war elephants. Alexander's army was outnumbered at least 5-1. But Alexander was a master of tactics. He used a brilliant strategy, drawing the Persian cavalry out to the flanks, creating a gap in their center. And just like at Issus, he led a decisive charge straight for Darius. Once again, Darius fled, and the Persian Empire was effectively his. Alexander marched into Babylon and then Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of Persia, which he later burned. Historians still debate why was it revenge for the Persian invasion of Greece a century and a half earlier, a drunken mistake, or a calculated political act to signal the end of the old empire. We may never know for sure, but Alexander wasn't done. He wasn't just a conqueror. He was an explorer, driven by an insatiable curiosity, a desire to reach the ends of the world. He pushed his army further east into what is now Afghanistan and Pakistan. This was a different kind of war. The terrain was brutal, and he faced fierce guerrilla resistance. His men were growing weary. They had marched thousands of miles and been away from home for years. In 326 BC, he reached the Hydaspes River in India, where he fought his last major battle against King Porus and his army of war elephants. It was a hard-won and bloody victory. Alexander, impressed by Porus's bravery, not only spared his life but made him an ally and expanded his territory. But this was the breaking point for his army. When Alexander announced his intention to march further into India to the Ganges River, his men finally mutinied. They refused to go any further. A frustrated and disappointed Alexander was forced to turn back. The journey home was just as grueling as the conquests. He split his forces, sending part of the army back by sea, while he led the rest through the brutal Gedrosian desert. Thousands died from heat and thirst. It was a disastrous march. When he finally returned to Persia, Alexander began implementing his vision of a blended empire. He organized a mass wedding where he and 80 of his top officers married Persian noblewomen. He incorporated Persian soldiers into his army and adopted some Persian customs and dress. This policy of fusion was controversial. Many of his Macedonian veterans felt he was betraying their traditions and becoming too barbarian. There was growing tension and even plots against his life. In 323 BC, back in the city of Babylon, Alexander was planning his next campaign, an invasion of Arabia, but he never got the chance. After a prolonged bout of drinking and feasting, he fell ill with a fever. For 10 days he battled the illness, but his strength failed him. He was just 32 years old. As he lay dying, his generals asked him to whom he left his vast empire. His answer, according to legend, was to the strongest. Alexander's death plunged his empire into chaos. His generals, the Diadochi or successors, immediately began fighting among themselves for control. For the next 40 years, the wars of the successors tore his empire apart, eventually splitting it into several Hellenistic kingdoms, like the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt and the Seleucid Empire in Asia. So, what is Alexander's legacy? He was, without a doubt, one of the greatest military commanders in history. His tactics are still studied in military academies today, but his impact goes far beyond the battlefield. He didn't just conquer lands, he connected them. His conquests shattered the barriers between East and West, ushering in the Hellenistic Age. For the next 300 years, Greek language, art, and ideas spread across his former empire, blending with local cultures to create something entirely new. He founded over 20 cities, many named Alexandria, which became hubs of commerce and intellectual life for centuries. Was he a hero, a visionary who tried to unite humanity, or a ruthless tyrant responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands? The truth is, he was probably both. He was a complex and contradictory figure, brilliant but brutal, visionary but violent. He was a man of his time, yet he created a world that outlived him by centuries. His story is a powerful reminder of what a single individual, driven by relentless ambition and an unshakable vision, can achieve. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the life of Alexander the Great, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history. Let me know in the comments who you'd like to see us cover next. Until then, stay curious.